Okay, video reply to a comment. I hope it takes. This is to Israel 5. What is it? I just always think of it as Israel, but it's Israel 5L. And I have an interesting relationship. I hope you agree, Israel, that you don't really agree with a lot of my fundamental outlook. But you have an open mind, you keep coming back, and I don't mean that in the sense that, oh, eventually I think Israel will learn. No, you'll probably always have your different view, but you have an open mind. You're willing to be challenged. We both get better answers from our own system by, engaging, or at least that's how I feel. So we could get testy, we can become agreeable. It all happens. That's good. Anyway, you say in this case, this isn't something we disagree on, but you say interesting topic: theory, metaphysics, dogma. I wonder how we make distinction between the three. Okay, well, I propose a distinction now, and keep in mind too. Now, sometimes you're discovering meaning, sometimes you're positing meaning, and it's really a back and forth. You discover meaning, you say, "Oh, that's good," and look, I discovered a meaning that almost works well, but this that makes it jam up, so you remove that, and you rework it. Okay, so consider three propositions for those terms that make distinctions. Now, first of all, the word meta can mean a lot of things. It could just mean abstraction. Okay, it's an abstraction. So metaphysics is a more abstract. It's a physics, but it's more abstract relative to some other physics because meta means a relationship. So a metaphysics is only a metaphysics relative to another. That kind of metaphysics is fine. The kind of metaphysics we're debating about, this classical notion of metaphysics, is something beyond physics that you don't confirm with physics. Because see, when you take a theory, we all seem to agree that you have to have unproved hypotheses in your system. You could think of them as a metaphysics, in which case somehow they're unproved, but they could be, or they're true somehow fundamentally. Or you could just take them as a theory, in which case you'll prove them in the future, and you'll abandon them if they never get proved in the future. You're trying to provoke them contradictions between them and reality, and so that you can eliminate them or prove that they're more and more accurate, at least compared to some other theory. Okay. So metaphysics is grammatically like theory. They both are where we talk about our unproved hypotheses. But in theory, we say they're unprovable in the sense only that we haven't proved these ones yet, and we know that when we do prove them, there'll be unproved ones in the front. So they're improvable in the sense we know there'll always be an unproved portion. But they can be demonstrated more and more in their correlation with physics. See, so metaphysics is the same kind of thing, only instead of saying that they're improvable, it says that they're somehow fundamentally true or necessary, or you have to make a guess, and somehow you have to adopt them, and they're unrelated to physics. So the main difference between theory and metaphysics is theory says, no, they're still going to be related to metaphysics. Because the thing is, even though you have to have them unproved, where did they come from? You're millions of years old. You've had this biology building these ideas into you, and material inference is obviously a part of the evolution of the brain, of all brains, a material influence and increasing your ability to make material inferences. So that's where those come from in the first place. So these metaphysics, like, we got them from nowhere. No, you were born with them, but you got them from your DNA, from your social training, from the fact that you have millions of years of experience as a continually living creature over that time, as the DNA has been encapsulated in a living entity the whole time. It might have shrunk down to just an egg and a sperm for a bit, but it was still living, and it carried all these experiences, certain aspects of them, in terms of their expression in your biological, the design, and so their metaphysics, the law of causes and effects is metaphysics. No, you might have it built into your brain. It's still not metaphysics, especially not. It's in your brain. The metaphysics idea, it comes from the idea that the things we think don't go on in the physical world. Therefore, the things we really think somehow are unphysical. In reality, it's all about information processing, right? So we have theories in cognitive science with information processing, cognitive psychology, theory of cognition in philosophy, and so on, all combined with the neurological model that explains it pretty well. Now, dogma, this is one I just like to go to an ancient thing, skeptics may be biased and have this particular view, but basically, Sextus Empiricus says that there's three kinds of class of philosophy in ancient times. There is the dogmatist that thinks that things can be known and generally that they already are. There is the skeptic that believes we always have to reflect, there's always more to learn, that there's always more questions. And there's basically a nihilist or an academic skeptic, the kind of skeptic that says we do know one thing, that nothing is known. Okay, so that's nihilism to me. I call that nihilism. That's the philosophy of nihilism. And in reality, you can't believe in nothing, but you can believe that you ought to believe in nothing and sort of parrot that, and you could get pretty close. But you can't believe in nothing unless you stop thinking. That's the way I look at that. Propose that definition. So in that case, dogmatism, is where you think that the things are known, and sexists like to point out that, hey, the skeptic is the one that likes philosophizing. He wants to keep philosophizing. The dogmatist already knows the truth and just wants to tell other people. Now, in our modern world, that kind of dogmatist is broken down because in reality, we notice, okay, well, there's a modern world and we have new technology. Things keep changing. We have to adapt. So the dogmatist has learned how to adapt and say, well, things are knowable, but I don't necessarily know them all, so I'm trying to figure out what that dogma is. And all they're doing there is adding epicycles. They are doing what Ptolemy did so he could keep the Earth at the center of the solar system. You could do a Ptolemaic system, and it comes up with exactly the same numbers as a heliocentric system, and Earth, right? It's just that it's weird. The math is complex, doesn't make sense, energy isn't conserved properly, and all kinds of weird stuff happens to your physics. That's why we don't do it. Occam's razor, really, that's the ultimate thing. We might as well use the simplest one. To come up with the same answers, use the one that's simpler, okay? But people like to keep the Earth at the center of the solar system. The dogmatists like to keep absolute knowledge at the center of their epistemology. They can't have that, so they make all these epicycles about, well, why they aren't really, there's nothing we can't really get at there. Maybe we can't know. Humans are fallible, and so that's when dogma becomes something akin to God's knowledge. It's always something like what God would know. And then people say, well, but we are just humans. We can't know what God would know. But that's the ultimate thing. You can make these epicycles and get almost the same answers, but in the end, there's this feel and impression of if you're taking your knowledge, you're searching for certainty. It's different from the idea of having a process. Somebody called me recently a process philosopher, and I like that because that's basically what I say. It's more important how you do philosophy, how you think about things, how you arrive at conclusions, than it is what conclusions you arrive at. In your life, it might actually seem more important because immediately in your immediate locality, it's very important what conclusions you come to. But to me, that's just what is your stage of development. You will get the kind of feedback you need for the stage of development you're at. Yes, I hope you could skip stages and skip along and just be gliding along, and that would be better. But ultimately, the only way that can happen is by focusing on how you think. Okay, how you think is going to determine how you progress. Okay, and that is ultimately in the long term more important than where you are right now. At the moment that your survival is threatened, where you are right now becomes more important because there will be no future otherwise. But we live in a state of panic a lot of times where we have plenty of room to act in the now and think of the future at the same time. And we act as though, believe and feel like, oh no, we better react to some immediate danger. And I do this. I know this. I have very tunnel vision about things, while long-term plans that I do have time for, or that would only take an hour or two here and there, but I get a tunnel vision. I feel too busy. And the reality isn't it? Maybe I'm making a video and I ought to be doing that thing. Um, but I can live with that too because this is a way, you cope with stress. But the point is that when you when you have these three categories, you get to define them in a way that does make sense. Now, I want a definition that makes sense so we can finally figure out which is also similar enough to the way we've always used the words that we can understand what people in the past that didn't have my definition are saying. We can interpret it that way. We can know, hey, maybe they had a little bit of different idea about this particular subject, and yet we can also interpret what would it mean if we took these hopefully cleaner technical definitions out of it. Metaphysics is a perfectly good example because I do like the interpretation of metaphysics where it's a kind of physics. Physics, abstract relationship to something else. I love the root term meta for that kind of thing. So, I can understand that term, but obviously the more common thing is this beyond physics, untestable physics, the realm of the a priori and the perfect world of forms that I claim is necessarily related to that. I used up my 10 minutes.